Hi, I'm Darlene Carman. Welcome to the show. Jeff Greenwald's travel writing has a loyal following. In preparation for this show, I read these 4 books. His writings are not so much about the destinations, they're more about the journeys. His travel stories are filled with humor, mystery, heartbreak, passion, historical insight, and enlightenment. Along with being a best-selling writer and stage performer, Jeff is also the executive director of Ethical Traveler, an organization dedicated to human rights and environmental protection. Hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You've been traveling and writing since barely out of high school. So what was your first major journey?
The first major journey was probably the one in 1979. At the time I was a visual artist and I went to Greece to sculpt marble. Yeah. But I met this beautiful woman there and I ended up following her to a place called Nepal, a place I'd never even heard of before. Yeah. And that pretty much changed my life because I fell in love with Nepal, and almost everything that's happened to me since relates to that part of Asia.
Ah, well, then again, in 1983, you won a journalism fellowship. So that also changed your life. How did that add to the first experience?
Well, after coming back from Nepal and Asia in 1979, I was desperate to get back there. I just tried every avenue. You know, I was an artist, I didn't have much money, but I was a writer. So I applied to the Rotary Foundation for a journalism fellowship, and they awarded me one. So from 1983 through 1984, I lived in Kathmandu and worked on a book. And I actually didn't succeed in writing the book, but I wrote many letters to my artist friends when I was in Nepal, and those actually became my first book, which was called Mr. Raja's Neighborhood. We don't have it here, but that was published in 1985. And that was the start, really, of my writing career in Nepal and in Asia.
Well, Kathmandu is, always been your major one, I would say, attraction. You've traveled all over, but that particular place has your heart, I would say. And in fact, you're home part of the time. So can you tell us what it's like hopping back and forth from living there in the Bay Area?
It's really different. In fact, I just led a trip there for a group of writers, and some of them, a few of the people on the trip were people who knew me here. And when we were in Kathmandu, they said, "You're a completely different person here." And it's really true. It's like having 2 distinct lives. It's a very different place to be, Kathmandu, than the Bay Area. I think when I think about it, the thing that strikes me the most is that people are more available there. In the community of expatriates and Nepalis, you can just drop in on anybody. You don't need to plan a week in advance. People are just, you see the same people day after day, and it's actually wonderful. I really miss that about living in the Bay Area, where even with your closest friends, you sometimes have to schedule weeks in advance to just have dinner. So that's one thing I love about Kathmandu, is the availability of people you're close to and you care about.
Well, don't they all do the emails and everything like that nowadays? I mean, don't you have that communication where you can communicate with everybody back there as well? What do you mean by just dropping in on your friends? What do you mean by that? It's
well,
it's
I
different.
mean literally just dropping in. You go to the front door and you come and you have a cup of tea in the middle of the day because you passed their house on the way to something else. No invitation necessary. And this is just the social aspect. Of course, there's all the other spiritual aspects and the art aspects, and the fact that Kathmandu is, of course, a very congested, polluted, dirty, noisy place that you have to navigate your way through to get to the gems that are sort of hidden within.
Now, but it wasn't so, right, when you went there the first time?
It was always a little bit nasty, I guess, in terms of dirt, but it was a different kind of pollution then. But yeah, I mean, it's always been a place that required a little bit of skill and forbearance to navigate. It's not like living here. You can't drink the water out of the tap.
Even now?
You have to watch where you step very carefully. And just riding a bicycle or a scooter through the streets is like playing a video game where you can't dare to make a single mistake.
And here, you can have your lattes and all this good stuff that we have here. So is it hard for you to switch back and forth? I mean, I'm not going to ask you which one you like better because I think I kind of know. But in other words, you've got your friends there and you get your friends here.
Yeah.
Is it easy for you to hop back and forth?
It's always a question of having to tear myself away. I have to tear myself away from here to go there, and from there to go here. But just to clear up one thing, you can get lattes in Kathmandu now too.
That's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. Well, we actually have some pictures here. Can we see the pictures of Kathmandu just a little bit?
Yeah, so that's the great stupa of Bodhnath before the earthquake, one of the main Tibetan Buddhist shrines on the outskirts. Well, it used to be the outskirts of Kathmandu. Now it's sort of in the center of Kathmandu. And those are the eyes of the Buddha looking in the four directions from the top of that, what's called a stupa. Next one. So the earthquake damaged quite a few beautiful buildings and temples in the Kathmandu Valley. The earthquake, of course, on April 25th, 2015. Bodhnath Stupa, which you see here, didn't fall down, but it was damaged enough so that they actually took parts of it down and they're completely rebuilding it. During my last trip there, they were in the process of rebuilding the whole top part, which you can see in this photograph. Let's go on to the next one.
Oh my goodness, all the pigeons.
A lot of pigeons. This is also after the earthquake. This is in the main square of Kathmandu, which is called Hanumandoka. And it's very hard to see in these images, but you can sort of see the struts holding up the temple. And what's in the foreground is part of a monument that fell over during the earthquake. All this hopefully will be restored in the relatively near future. And that's one of the great things about the earthquake. It was a horrible incident that killed more than 8,000 people. The silver lining, such as it is that many traditional craftspeople, sculptors, architects are now working again to restore all these temples and restore their art.
That's wonderful to hear. Wow.
Let's move on.
What do you do with those pigeons?
So this is, it's kind of odd. This is Nyatapola, which is one of the highest temples in the Kathmandu Valley in a little town called Bhaktapur. And it's just about the highest temple around, but it wasn't damaged at all in the earthquake. It didn't fall down at all. And it's just kind of a monument to the amazing architecture that they mastered back in the 16th and 17th century. Most people don't know this, but the Nepalis invented the pagoda.
No,
I think there's
didn't
one
know
more
that.
slide.
Oh,
And this is on the
beautiful.
steps of that same temple, just showing some kids there sitting amongst all these gods and goddesses and demons. And as you can see, most of the construction there is of brick and wood. And when there's a strong enough earthquake, brick does tend to fall down. And a lot of the old buildings that had survived the huge earthquake of 1934 fell down in this last one. And the destruction is pretty distressing when you go there and see it. But most of the temples are not destroyed. And I feel that this is a great time to visit Kathmandu because the process of rebuilding is as fascinating as the buildings themselves, in a sense.
Yes. And next, do we have another one?
I don't think so. I think that might be the last one.
Okay. Well, I enjoyed reading about your exposure to Hinduism and Buddhism. And I'd like to know, what are your lasting thoughts? Some of them. Can I hear all of them?
Well, the interesting thing about Hinduism and Buddhism is that they're sort of interrelated. There's a very tight relationship between Hinduism and Buddhism. And the reason for that is that it's believed that one of the great Hindu gods, named Vishnu, the great preserver, who returns to earth again and again to save humanity from destruction, Vishnu will return 10 times. And for each of his different avatars, his forms when he returned, he takes a different shape, a different creature. His 9th appearance on the earth to save humanity from itself was as the Buddha. And this is sort of the hinge that really connects Hinduism and Buddhism. So Buddha is a Hindu god. And it's very fascinating because in Nepal, in Kathmandu Valley especially, you can go to almost any Hindu temple and see images of the Buddha, and almost any Buddhist temple and see images of Hindu gods and goddesses. So there's a great blending. It's a wonderful marbling of these two ancient traditions.
Wow. Yeah. So your feelings on it, do you practice any of the teachings? Is there any favorite teachings that you like?
Well, if there's anyone listening who's a strong Buddhist practitioner, I have not taken my vows. I have not taken refuge. I'm a lay Buddhist. I practice the teachings of the Buddha. I identify myself as a Buddhist, but I haven't gone through the formal process of having a lama or a Rinpoche who I work with. But the basic tenets of Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, all the basic things that Buddha taught about right livelihood, about non-attachment, I try to practice these things. It's a practice. They call it a practice because it's really hard to get it right.
Sure.
And when you do get it all right, you're a Buddha.
Really? Oh, well, I really enjoyed reading about some of the practices that they have in there. I found them, I've already been studying on my own. I have a lot of books, and it is really hard to understand. I imagine if you're living there and seeing it and talking to the people and having instructors, you don't call them senseis. What do you call them?
Lamas.
Lamas, thank you. Not senseis. You can probably get further in your studies because you have someone that you can talk with.
It's all about good teachers, and there's a lot of very good teachers there, and it's just very available. It's all around you. You can take off for an afternoon and get some teachings. You can, go in the evening after work to the Bodha Stupa or one of the other Buddhist shrines and be among practicing Buddhists. Most of whom are not Westerners, but local Nepalis and Tibetans who are very devout. And it's inspiring to be in a place where the spiritual is so present in everyday life. When I traveled with my mother to India when she turned 75, after we came back, I said, "What was your main impression?" And she said, "I was stunned by how the religion is so integrated into everyday life." And it really is. And it's something that most people who visit for the first time really take home with them.
It's just, I enjoyed all your books, but let's talk a minute about this one, The Size of the World. Now, this was about traveling the world without airplanes.
Right.
So, why is this book important? What was your goal?
Well, the goal was to go around the world without taking any airplanes. And I took this trip to celebrate my 40th birthday, which was in 1994. I'm getting so old, it's hard to remember when my birthday was. So in 1993 to 1994, I circumambulated the world without taking any airplanes. And part of this was in the Buddhist tradition of making what's called a kora, which is a circle, a navigation around a sacred object. The Earth is the most sacred object that any of us really know and have. So the idea was to go around the Earth this way. It took 9 months. I visited, I think, 28 countries. And it was an extraordinary journey. And since it was in 1993-94, many of your viewers, especially here in the Silicon Valley, Palo Alto area, will remember that that's when Mosaic was launched and the internet really started. So I did something that no one had ever done before at that time, which is in 20 of the locations that I stopped around the world, I sent back stories on the internet and created what's acknowledged to be the world's first internet travel blog. And it was really amazing. It was just at the dawn of that era. Nobody in any of these countries really had any idea what I was doing. It took a long time, sometimes hours, for the dispatches to go through back to the place I was sending them, that then put them up on the newly minted World Wide Web. But it was a wonderful sense of purpose in the trip to do this. And I remember they put a map on the site, and you could click on the location and read the story. Everything about the internet was so fresh in those days.
Yes.
Now we take all this for granted, but back then it was sort of groundbreaking. And
well, yes, but you didn't really know exactly what was going on. You didn't know the future, what's going to happen. So that must make you feel awesome.
It was 5 years before the word blog was even invented.
And of course, now you blog probably regularly.
No.
No?
Not at all, really.
No? Well, you're writing. There's your blogs right there. I mean, you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
So, how has travel and travel writing, how has it changed in the past 23 years?
That's such a big question. I think that the way everything has changed is really around the information economy and technology. Everyone's a travel writer now. Everybody is taking pictures with their smartphones, loading them up instantly to whatever social media they use, and writing about their experiences. I think the bar for what constitutes good travel writing has gotten a little bit lower. People are just maybe not reading as much as they should be of really great travel writing. But for me, I think travel writing itself is almost a genre that's becoming obsolete. The world is so interconnected that I find that the art or the craft of travel writing is really about the people you meet in places and how their experiences are unfolding in a different place. It's not about being in a different place as much as the different experiences people have living in that place. I don't know if that makes any sense, but for instance, I could write a really wonderful story about the priests in Kathmandu who are sanctifying the new stupa at Bodha, or about the people who are setting up the information cafes along the old Silk Road. But it's really about their story almost more than the place that they're in. So travel writing has changed quite a bit, I think.
Well, you have competition now with people with all the, you're a great photographer. We're just seeing a smidgen of what you have. You're really a great photographer and have a lot of beautiful pictures. And if it was a different venue, we could show more. But that's a lot of competition when you have people with their little phones doing all this in front of you.
Yeah, the content economy is taking a bite out of real artists and writers, I think. And that's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah. Well, this book intrigued me because this book, Shopping for Buddhas, is 25 years old. And when I sat there reading about this salted caramel gelato, that's just so timely.
So everyone's going to wonder what salted caramel gelato is doing in a book called Shopping for Buddhas.
And 25 years old. So now you're like having an anniversary on this one. It's been redone.
It's the anniversary edition. The book came out 25 years ago. It's about my quest for the perfect Buddha statue in Kathmandu, which actually occurred in the late 1980s and became my first stage show. The salted caramel gelato refers to a scene in the book where Mara, who's the lord of the underworld, is basically tempting Buddha to give up his search for enlightenment and enjoy the worldly pleasures that he's offering. And he offers a lot more than salted caramel gelato. He offers any number of racing cars and beautiful women and anything you could ever use to tempt someone from their meditation. But Buddha won't give in, and he stays on his path and attains the awakened state, as he calls it. So Mara's efforts to tempt him with delicious ice cream are all in vain.
Well, I enjoyed reading about your shopping experience, just that portion of it. I didn't realize that there were so many different poses with Buddha and the various poses. So I'd like to get an idea, and I believe that we have some pictures here. I'd like to see, maybe you can tell us about some of the poses as we look at the pictures of Buddha.
Well, every Buddha statue is designed according to very strict formulas. In the West, art is very inventive. The artist creates something and then the viewer has to figure out how to appreciate it. In the East, it's very different. The artist works from strict formulas that have been in place for many, many centuries, and it's up to the viewer to really get that sense of awakening from it. Let's go on to the next one. So this is one of the most common Buddha poses. It's called Bhumisparsa Mudra in Sanskrit, which means calling the earth to witness. Just at the moment of enlightenment, Buddha is challenged. Who gives you the right to be enlightened? And Buddha touched the earth with his right hand and called the earth as his witness. Let's go on.
So his hands are down?
His hands are down, and here's a beautiful hand from a statue at a place called Wat Sri Chum in Thailand. If I were standing next to that, I would come up about a third of the way up the fingers. This is from a gigantic Buddha statue covered with gold and moss in northern Thailand.
Wow, that's really neat. I love the moss.
This pose you see the Buddha in here in a Thai temple is called Fear Not. He raises his hand in a gesture of protection, another very common gesture of the Buddha.
Like that.
It's beautiful, yeah. And let's just end with this one. Lying on his right side, smiling peacefully. This is Paranibbana, which means the Buddha's passing to nirvana. At about the age of 80, Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha, died. And as he lay on his side dying, he preached his last sermon, which is that all things are illusory. Look diligently toward your own awakening.
Very nice. I really like that. So, there's just so much to talk about. We have so many books. It's just wonderful. Can you tell us why the title is Snake Lake? What does that mean?
I lived in a neighborhood in Kathmandu named Nag Pokri, where the sacred snake gods are said to live. And I used to just call it Snake Lake. And so the book is named after the neighborhood I lived in Nepal.
Very nice. I loved reading about your brother Jordan, especially his impromptu, I guess we'd call them social experiments. I love the one that he's in the museum and the French couple comes in. I mean, tell us about your brother.
My brother was an extraordinary person. He spoke 22 languages. He was a linguist, a philologist, and absolutely brilliant athlete, very talented, funny guy in many ways. He also suffered from depression, which eventually took his life.
Yes.
But he used to conduct these crazy experiments, almost like performance art, where he'd put himself in these situations and mimic the people around him in a way that made them very uncomfortable, but was extremely hilarious to anyone who witnessed it. I wrote about a few of those incidents in the book. I don't think we have time during the show to really go through one of them in detail.
I love them. I love reading them, and the humor and the way you wrote them. It was just like you're right there at the time that your brother was experiencing him.
Thanks.
And I know, you know, his ending is sad and all that, but you have made him come forward and be happy, at least here in your book. And
Thanks.
I really
the book
enjoyed that.
is a tribute to my brother as well as to my
tell.
Buddhist studies.
I really liked it. I'm sorry. I'd love to talk more about your brother. I loved the stories about him. Doug and I really enjoyed watching your performance, your one-man show. How do you come up with the title, like Strange Travel Suggestions? That's the title of it.
Of the solo show. It's called Strange Travel Suggestions. It's a bastardization of a line from Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut, in which he says, peculiar travel suggestions are dancing lessons from God. And I've sort of amended it to strange travel suggestions. But I do think that sort of the universe is sort of guides your steps, much as it does with the mythical fool in the tarot. As you go off wandering, you're steered towards those encounters that will mean the most to you. And that's kind of how the show is arranged, as a random exercise in storytelling based on the spin of a wheel.
So your audience comes up and they spin the wheel and then it stops on a symbol. My wondering is, like, do you have different stories for every symbol that they come? I thought
for
so.
each symbol on the wheel, and there's 30 of them, I can tell anywhere from 3 to 7 different stories.
How does performance affect your writing, or is it the other way around?
It's all storytelling. I love the immediate feedback of telling stories to a live audience. There's nothing like it. Writing is more rewarding in that you can add more detail, but storytelling in public on stage is absolutely wonderful, and I just love it. I discovered it late in life, and I hope I continue to do it for the rest of my life.
Well, do you have any upcoming shows?
Just an appearance on June 26th at Stageworks in San Francisco. Just one story, but it'll be a good one.
And that's on your website. People can check there to find
It'll be on
out the
Facebook.
times on Facebook, and they can find the times and all that. Well, that was really, really, really nice. I'd like to know what the essence is of Ethical Traveler. That's your organization, and you're the executive director.
Yes. We started the organization in 2003, and it's an attempt to basically use the power of the travel community to affect the way countries behave in terms of human rights and environmental protection. Travel is the biggest industry in the world, bigger than oil, bigger than steel, bigger than anything.
Really?
But travelers don't know how much power they have. So we created ethicaltraveler.org to bring travelers together and let them put their voices together to support countries that are doing good work and to kind of warn countries that are kind of on the edge of doing very bad things.
So how does a country get to be on the 10 best ethical destinations, and what are their incentives to do so?
Well, when you're on the 10 best ethical destinations list, it's very prestigious for the countries that make it. We choose only from the developing world, countries that depend on tourism for their economy. And we have 35 different metrics we look at, everything from press freedom to childhood education, to mortality, to fresh water, to gay and lesbian and trans rights, to the way animals are treated. And once we narrow it down using those metrics to about 20, 25 countries, our team of about 20 researchers goes in and we look carefully at those final tier countries, read their newspapers, talk to people, and basically select the 10 best from that process.
And so what does the country get? It gets the people coming, but do they get anything else? What is the real incentives?
They get bragging rights. They get to say, we are one of the most ethical destinations in the world. And there are some people who actually base their travels around good places to go. Any of the countries on our list are places where your money will support an economy that is absolutely supportive of human rights and the environment. Places like Uruguay, Palau. I would advise viewers to go to ethicaltraveler.org and look at our report for this year's Best Ethical Destinations.
Some of the countries are on several times.
Year after year,
too.
you mean?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And how about your upcoming tours? I know you're traveling in what, August? Tell me.
Well, I'm not leading trips this year because I'm doing other work, but Ethical Traveler is doing a trip to Cuba in October, which will be led by the wonderful Tim Tendick. So that's the only trip we actually have going this year. So I would just say another thing worth checking out.
And that information, of course, will.
It's on the
be
website.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do people get involved with Ethical Traveler?
You just go to the website, and when you land on the page, it'll ask you to become a member. There's no fee.
There's no fee.
Anyone can make a donation. We run strictly on private donations. We're an all-volunteer organization. But just put in your email, and you'll get our monthly newsletter, which has original news stories, and be privy to the other things that we offer in terms of trips and news and updates and so forth.
Wonderful. Well, we're just about out of time, but I want to ask you, what's next? What are you writing? Are you writing something now? What's your plans?
I'm working on a very important book about responsible travel worldwide. And I'm also going to start work on my next book, my 7th book, on June 6th, which would have been my brother's 59th birthday.
Is it going to be a lot about him?
It's not going to be about him at all,
No?
But it's going to be dedicated to him in a sense.
But I love his stories. I hope you include a few more. I
Thank
just
you
love
for that.
those
I'll try to
stories.
include a few more of his stories in this new book.
Thank you. And will I get to read it?
I hope so.
send me a
The working
copy?
title is 108 Beloved Objects.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I think
Pleasure.
you're a fascinating person.
Thank
I
you.
really enjoyed your books, but I also enjoyed talking to you. I just wish we had more time, but we don't. But if for more information about Jeff's books, please go to the website, and also the information about Ethical Travelers. And it should be on the websites. Both should be posted. So thanks for watching the show, and watch again. And would you please sign my book?
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks, Darlene. It's been great.
Thank you. Yeah, your brother.